Imagine a car so broken, it's barely more than a whisper of what it once was. A '67 Stingray, hidden under layers of rust and secrets, left to rot in a small-town garage. But what if I told you its owner isn't who you think? A woman walks in, silver hair and a guarded smile, dropping off this wreck with one rule: no questions. Why? Because beneath the dents lies a story, a billionaire's past, a love lost in a crash, and a mystery even she's afraid to face. And the man fixing it? He's got ghosts of his own, ones he's buried in grease and steel for 20 years. What happens when two broken souls collide over a car that refuses to die? Stick around, because this isn't just a restoration, it's a revelation. If you're hooked on stories where kindness uncovers miracles and love rises from the ashes, hit that subscribe button down below. We're diving deep into this journey together, right here on Ten Kenqua Ban, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single turn of the wheel. The rain tapped a steady rhythm on the tin roof of Harper's garage, a weathered outpost, on the edge of Harmony, Pennsylvania. Nathan "Nate" Harper, 55 and graying at the temples, stood beneath the flickering glow of a single fluorescent bulb, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days. The air smelled of oil and rust, a familiar comfort to a man who'd spent half his life coaxing broken machines back to life. Outside, the world blurred into a watercolor of dusk and drizzle, but inside, it was just Nate and the quiet hum of a life he'd settled into, one of solitude, routine, and echoes of a love long gone. He was about to lock up when the low rumble of an engine cut through the rain. Headlights pierced the gloom, and a car rolled into the gravel lot, its tires crunching like a sigh. Nate squinted through the streaked window. It was a Corvette, or what was left of one. The once sleek body was a patchwork of rust and dents, its silver paint peeling like old skin. He chuckled under his breath, muttering, "Well, ain't that a breathing pile of scrap?" But something about it tugged at him, a whisper of beauty beneath the decay. The driver's door creaked open, and a woman stepped out, her figure framed by the storm. She wore a plain gray coat, damp at the shoulders, and carried herself with a quiet grace that didn't match the wreck she'd arrived in. As she approached, Nate pushed the door open, the bell above jingling faintly. Up close, she was older than he'd guessed. 60, maybe, with silver hair tucked under a scarf and eyes that held a depth he couldn't place. She stopped just inside, raindrops clinging to her lashes, and said, "I need this fixed. Make it run again. No questions, please." Her voice was soft but firm, like someone used to being heard. Nate raised an eyebrow, glancing past her to the Corvette. "That's a tall order, ma'am. She's seen better days. Decades, even. You sure you don't want something newer?" He meant it half as a joke, but her lips tightened and she shook her head. "It's not about new. It's about this one. Can you do it?" There was a plea buried in her words, one she didn't voice outright. Nate's hand stilled on the rag. He'd heard that tone before, 20 years ago when Ellen, his late wife, had begged him to fix her old pickup one last time before the cancer took her. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take a look. Name's Nate Harper, by the way." "Clara," she replied, hesitating as if the name felt foreign on her tongue. She didn't offer a last name, and Nate didn't press. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing back. "Thank you, Nate. I'll check in soon." With that, she disappeared into the rain, leaving the Corvette behind like a ghost she couldn't bear to face. Nate dragged the car inside, the tow chain clanking against the concrete floor. Under the harsh light, he saw more than just rust. There was history here. The leather seats were cracked but stitched with care, the dashboard scratched with faint initials he couldn't quite read. He ran a hand along the hood, feeling an odd pull, like the car was waiting to tell him something. "What's your story, huh?" he murmured, half to himself. He popped the driver's seat forward to check the floorboard, and that's when he saw it. A glint of silver caught in the shadows. Kneeling, he fished out a delicate necklace, its chain tangled but intact. A small pendant dangled from it, engraved with the words "To my light" in a script worn smooth by time. Nate held it up, the bulb overhead casting tiny reflections across the garage. It wasn't cheap trinket, it was personal, heavy with meaning. Clara's, no doubt. She'd dropped it, or maybe left it behind without knowing. For a moment, he pictured Ellen's face the way she'd beam when he'd fix something small, a toaster, a radio, just to see her smile. She'd called him her light, too, once. The memory stung, sharp and sweet, and Nate closed his fist around the necklace. He wouldn't pawn it or toss it in a drawer. He'd keep it safe, give it back when Clara returned. It was the least he, you see, could do for a stranger who'd trusted him with her wreck, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, and Nate stepped to the doorway, peering into the fading dusk. Clara's figure was long gone, but her presence lingered, woven into the mystery of the car and the weight of the necklace in his pocket. He didn't know why she'd chosen him, or why this battered Corvette mattered so much. But as he locked the garage and headed home to his quiet little house down the road, a flicker of curiosity stirred in him, something he hadn't felt in years. Back in the garage, the Corvette sat silent, its rusted frame glowing faintly under the dim bulb. It was more than a job now. It was a thread, thin and fragile, tying Nate to a woman named Clara, and to a story neither of them yet understood. Somewhere beneath the dust and ruin, there was light waiting to be uncovered, and for the first time in a long while, Nate wanted to find it. The next morning broke over Harmony with a hesitant sun, its rays slipping through the garage's grimy windows to dance across the Corvette's rusted hood. Nate Harper stood before it, coffee mug in one hand, the other tracing the jagged lines of decay that marred the car's once proud frame. He'd slept fitfully, the necklace in his pocket tugging at his thoughts like a half-remembered dream. It wasn't just a job anymore. This wreck had a soul, and he was determined to hear it whisper. He set the mug down on a workbench cluttered with wrenches and oil-stained rags, then pulled on his worn leather gloves. The Corvette groaned as he pried open the hood, revealing an engine caked in grime but oddly intact, as if someone had cared for it long ago. Nate whistled low. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" he said, his voice echoing in the empty garage. He started with the basics, draining old oil, checking spark plugs, each task a ritual that steadied him, like a prayer to the machines he'd always understood better than people. As he worked, he noticed the scratches, not random nicks, but deliberate marks etched into the dashboard's faded wood. He leaned closer, squinting under the fluorescent light. The letters JAMES emerged, faint but unmistakable, carved with a knife or a key by a hand that had trembled, or loved. Nate's chest tightened. A name, a story. He thought of Clara's eyes, the way they'd flickered with something unspoken when she'd dropped off the car. Was James hers? A husband? A child? He shook his head, pushing the questions down. She'd said no questions, and he'd honor that, for now. The bell above the door jingled, startling him. Clara stepped in, carrying a small tin box that smelled faintly of cinnamon and butter. Her scarf was gone today, silver hair falling softly around her shoulders, and she wore a sweater that looked too big, like it belonged to someone else. "Morning, Nate," she said, her voice warmer than the day before. "I brought something. A thank you." Nate wiped his hands on his jeans and took the tin, popping it open to reveal a stack of homemade snickerdoodles. The scent hit him like a memory. Ellen used to bake them on rainy Sundays, filling their little house with sweetness. "You didn't have to," he said, offering a crooked smile, "but I'm not complaining. Been a while since I had anything this good." Clara's lips curved, a small victory against the sadness that clung to her. "It's nothing fancy, just something to keep you going while you wrestle with that beast." She nodded toward the Corvette, her gaze lingering on it a beat too long. They stood there, the silence stretching comfortably between them. Nate gestured to a stool by the workbench. "Take a load off if you want. I was just getting started. She's a fighter, this one. Got more life in her than she looks." Clara hesitated, then sat, folding her hands in her lap. She watched him work, her presence quiet but steady, like a shadow that didn't demand attention. "Ever driven one of these?" Nate asked, loosening a bolt. "Corvettes, I mean. Back in their prime, they were something else." Clara's eyes softened. "Once or twice, a long time ago. They're loud, aren't they? Like they're shouting at the world." Nate chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Ellen, my wife, she loved the sound. Said it made her feel alive. We'd take her old Chevy out sometimes just to hear it roar." He didn't know why he'd said it, but Clara didn't flinch. She tilted her head, listening. "Ellen sounds like she was special," she said gently. "She was." Nate's voice dipped, rough around the edges. "Gone 20 years now. Cancer. But yeah, she was special." He glanced at Clara, expecting her to change the subject, but she didn't. "Time doesn't make it easier, does it?" she said, almost to herself. "You just learn to carry it." Nate nodded, surprised by how her words landed. Soft, but heavy with truth. He wanted to ask about James, about the necklace, but the moment felt too fragile. Instead, he reached for a wrench and turned back to the car. "Let's see if we can get this old girl to sing again." He fiddled with the dashboard, brushing dust from a small panel when his fingers grazed a hidden catch. A faint click, and an old radio flickered to life, static crackling before settling into a melody. Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight." The notes filled the garage warm and haunting, and Clara froze. Her hands clenched in her lap and her breath hitched. Before Nate could say anything, tears spilled down her cheeks, silent but unstoppable. "Clara!" he started, stepping toward her, but she stood abruptly, the stool scraping against the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I need to go." She fled, the tin of cookies still open on the bench, the song trailing after her like a ghost. Nate stood there, stunned, the wrench slipping from his hand to clatter on the concrete. The radio played on, Sinatra's voice weaving through the air, and he saw it again. Those scratches, James, glowing, faintly in the light. Clara hadn't just left a car with him. She'd left a piece of her past, raw and bleeding, and he'd stumbled right into it. He turned off the radio, the silence rushing back like a tide. The necklace in his pocket felt heavier now, a key, too, something he didn't yet understand. Clara was running from more than a song. She was running from a wound, and Nate, for reasons he couldn't name, wanted to help her face it. Not because he had to, but because something in her quiet strength, her broken edges, called to the part of him that still believed in fixing what was lost. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the Corvette. Nate picked up a cookie, took a bite, and tasted cinnamon, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at something new. The garage felt emptier after Clara's sudden departure, the silence thicker than the dust settling on the Corvette's hood. Nate Harper stood by the workbench, staring at the open tin of snickerdoodles, their cinnamon scent mingling with the oil and metal of his world. The echo of Sinatra's voice lingered in his mind, a melody that had unlatched something in Clara, something she wasn't ready to face. He didn't know her story, not yet, but he knew that look, the way grief could hide behind a steady gaze until a single note cracked it open. Outside, the sun had burned off the morning haze, leaving harmony bathed in a golden glow. Nate picked up his wrench, determined to keep working. The Corvette wasn't just a job now. It was a bridge, fragile but real, between him and the woman who'd left her tears behind. He tightened a bolt, then paused, running his thumb over the scratched JAMES on the dashboard. "Whoever you were," he murmured. "You're still holding her tight." Days passed, and Clara didn't return. Nate threw himself into the car, stripping rusted parts, sanding rough edges, each task a quiet promise to see it through. He'd catch himself glancing at the door, half expecting the bell to jingle, but it stayed silent. The necklace sat in his pocket, a small weight he couldn't ignore. He'd meant to give it back that day, but now it felt like a tether, a reason for her to come back. On the fourth afternoon, the bell finally rang. Nate looked up, his heart giving a small, unexpected lurch. Clara stepped inside, her gray coat swapped for a navy sweater, her silver hair loose and catching the light. She carried no tin this time, just a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I didn't mean to run off like that." Nate set down his rag, wiping his hands on his jeans. "No apology needed. I've seen my share of tough days. That radio, it caught you off guard, didn't it?" She nodded, stepping closer to the Corvette. "It was his song. Our song. I wasn't ready to hear it." She didn't say James, but Nate heard the name in the spaces between her words. He pulled the stool out for her, the same one she'd sat on before. "Take a seat if you want. I've been keeping her company." Clara sat, her hands folding in her lap like a habit. She watched him work, the clank of tools filling the quiet. After a while, Nate broke the silence. "Ellen, my wife, she had a song, too. Moon River. Used to play it on this old record player we had. I couldn't listen to it for years after. She passed." Clara's gaze met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "What changed?" she asked. "Time, mostly, and fixing things." He gestured to the garage. "Keeps my hands busy, my head quiet. You ever find something like that?" She looked at the Corvette, her fingers brushing the air above its fender. "I used to. With him. We'd drive for hours, no place to be, just the road and us. After he was gone, I stopped. Everything stopped." Her voice wavered, but she steadied it. "That's why this car matters. It's all I've got left of." "Those days?" Nate nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into him. He thought of Ellen's Chevy, how he'd sold it after she died because keeping it hurt too much. "I get it," he said. "More than you'd think." They fell into an easy rhythm after that, Clara watching, Nate working, their silences punctuated by small talk about the weather, the town, anything but the past. She didn't cry again, and he didn't push. But as the afternoon wore on, something shifted. Clara stood, stepping closer to the car. "Can I help?" she asked almost shyly. "Nothing big, just something to do." Nate grinned, surprised. "Sure. How about wiping down that fender? Got a clean rag right here." He handed her one and she took it, her movements careful but sure. They worked side by side, the Corvette between them like a shared secret. She laughed once, a small, rusty sound, when he smudged grease on his cheek and he wiped it off, chuckling. "See? You're a natural." She smiled, a real one this time, and reached for the dashboard to steady herself. Her fingers brushed the carved James, and Nate saw her tense, her breath catching. He acted on instinct, stepping in. "Here, let me—" He grabbed a can of polish, but his elbow knocked it over, oil spilling across the concrete. Clara gasped, then laughed again, louder as they both scrambled for rags. "Nice save," she teased, her eyes bright with something new. Life, maybe. Nate laughed too, the sound echoing in the garage. They mopped up the mess, knees brushing as they knelt, and when they stood, Clara's hand lingered near the dashboard. She traced the JAMES with a trembling finger, her voice barely a whisper. He'd like this, seeing it come back. Nate froze, caught off guard by the rawness of it. Before he could respond, she looked at him, her eyes glistening but steady. "You're good at this, Nate. Not just the car, the rest of it." She didn't explain, but he knew. Knew she meant. The space he'd given her, the quiet way he'd let her be. He swallowed, nodding. I try. Sometimes that's all we've got. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the necklace. Found this, by the way. Figured it's yours. Clara's breath hitched as she took it, her fingers closing around the pendant. Thank you, she whispered, clutching it to her chest. She didn't leave this time. She stayed, watching him work until the sun dipped low, painting the garage in shades of amber. And Nate felt it. A spark, faint but real, flickering in the shadows. They'd both carried too long. The days grew shorter in harmony, the late October air carrying a crisp edge that settled into the bones of Nate Harper's garage. He'd grown used to Clara's visits now, her quiet presence a steady hum beneath the clatter of his tools. The Corvette was taking shape. Rust sanded away, new parts gleaming where old ones had failed. But it wasn't just the car coming back to life. Something else was stirring. Something Nate hadn't felt since Ellen's laughter filled their home, a fragile, unnamed hope. Clara arrived that afternoon with a thermos of coffee, the kind that steamed when she poured it into 2 chipped mugs. She handed one to Nate, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting second, and he caught a whiff of her scent. Lavender, soft and unexpected. Thought you could use this, she said, settling onto her stool. It's getting cold out there. Nate took a sip, the warmth spreading through him. Much obliged. You're spoiling me, Clara. First cookies, now this. I might start charging you less. He winked and she smiled, a real one, crinkling the corners of her eyes. It was a sight he was starting to crave, like the first light after a long night. He turned back to the Corvette, peeling back a layer of chipped paint on the door. Underneath, a flash of silver caught his eye. Not the dull gray he'd expected, but a metallic sheen that hinted at something rare. He grabbed a scraper, working carefully, and soon a patch of original color emerged. Well, I'll be, he muttered, stepping back. This ain't just any Corvette. Looks like a 67. Stingray, limited run. Someone painted over it to hide what it was. Clara's mug paused halfway to her lips. You're sure? Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Pretty damn sure, Nate said, running a hand through his graying hair. These babies were worth a fortune back in the day. Still are, if you find the right buyer. Who'd cover up something like this? He glanced at her, expecting curiosity, but her face had gone still, like a lake before a storm. Before he could ask, the bell jingled, and a stranger strode in, a man in a crisp suit, too polished for harmonies. Dusty streets. He was tall, mid-40s, with a jawline that looked carved from stone and eyes that scanned the garage like he owned it. Nathan Harper? He asked, his tone clipped. That's me, Nate said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Who's this? The man ignored the question, his gaze locking on the Corvette. I'm here for the car. It's leaving with me today. Where's the owner? Nate bristled, stepping between the man and the vehicle. Hold up, pal. I don't know who you are, but this car's mine to fix until Clara says otherwise. She's the one who brought it here. The man's lips thinned. Clara doesn't decide that anymore. I represent her interests. Name's Victor Lang, her assistant. She's been distracted. I'm taking it off her hands. He pulled out a checkbook, scribbling a figure that made Nate's eyebrows shoot up. That should cover your time. Load it up. Nate didn't touch the check. I don't work for you, Victor. I work for her. She wants it fixed, and I gave my word. His voice was low, steady, the kind of stubborn Ellen used to tease him about. Victor's eyes narrowed, but before he could argue, Clara stood, her thermos clattering to the bench. Victor, stop! Her tone was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. She stepped forward, her small frame suddenly commanding. The car stays. I hired Nate, not you. Victor turned, his expression a mix of surprise and irritation. Clara, this is ridiculous. You've let this drag on too long. It's a liability. It's mine, she snapped, her voice rising, and I say it stays. She softened, glancing at Nate. He's doing what I asked. You don't get to undo that. Victor stared at her, then at Nate, who crossed his arms and didn't budge. With a curt nod, he pocketed the checkbook. Fine, but we're not done talking about this. He stormed out, the bell clanging in his wake. The garage fell silent, the air thick with unspoken questions. Nate looked at Clara, her hands trembling as she clutched the necklace he'd returned. You all right? He asked, stepping closer. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. I didn't expect him to come here. Victor? He's been trying to manage me since everything fell apart. She sank back onto the stool, her voice dropping. That car was James's, my husband. He died 20 years ago. A crash. This was his dream, and I kept it, even when it broke me. Nate's breath caught. He'd guessed at loss, but not this, a tragedy etched into metal and memory. Clara, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She shook her head, a tear slipping free. You couldn't. I didn't want you to, but you're bringing it back. Him back. And I don't know if I'm ready. She looked at him raw and unguarded. Why are you doing this, Nate? Why care so much? He hesitated, then pulled the necklace from his pocket where he'd kept it since finding it. Because I know what it's like to hold on to something broken. Ellen's gone, but fixing things, it's how I keep her close. Maybe I'm doing that for you too. Clara took the necklace, her fingers brushing his again, longer this time. Thank you, she whispered, and for a moment they stood there, the Corvette gleaming faintly between them. A relic of pain, yes, but also of possibility. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and Nate felt it. A shift, subtle but real, pulling them closer to something neither could name. The garage hummed with a new energy the next day, as if the confrontation with Victor had swept away some of the dust that clung to Nate Harper's world. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the silver streaks he'd uncovered on the Corvette's frame, turning it into something almost alive. Nate stood back, hands on his hips, admiring the progress. The engine was cleaned, the wiring patched. He was close to firing it up, but it wasn't just the car he was thinking about. It was Clara, the way she'd stood her ground, the crack in her voice when she'd said James. She arrived later that morning, quieter than usual, her navy sweater swapped for a beige cardigan. That softened her edges. She carried no coffee or cookies this time, just the necklace dangling from her fingers, its pendant glinting as she stepped inside. Morning, Nate, she said, her voice tentative but warm. I didn't scare you off yesterday, did I? Nate chuckled, wiping grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. Takes more than a fancy suit and a bad attitude to run me off. You holding up okay after that? Clara nodded, settling onto her stool. Victor's persistent, but he means well, in his own way. I've leaned on him too long, I suppose. She paused, twirling the necklace. I didn't sleep much last night. Kept thinking about what you said, about holding on to something broken. Nate leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. Yeah? Hit a nerve, did I? She smiled, faintly. More than you know. You're right, though. I've been holding on to this car, this pain, like it's all I have left of James. But seeing it come back, it's stirring things up I thought I'd buried. He nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into him. I know that dance. After Ellen passed, I'd sit in this garage for hours, fixing nothing, just staring at her tools. Took me years to figure out I wasn't keeping her alive. I was keeping myself stuck. Clara's eyes met his, steady and searching. How'd you get unstuck? Started small, he said. Fixed a neighbor's tractor, then a kid's bike. Kept going till I could breathe again. Maybe this, he tapped the Corvette's hood, is your small start. She looked at the car, her fingers tightening around the necklace. Maybe. Can we try it today? See if it runs? Nate grinned, surprised by the spark in her voice. "Thought you'd never ask. Let's give her a spin." He grabbed his keys, popped the hood one last time to double-check, then slid into the driver's seat. Clara hesitated, then climbed in beside him, her hands clasped in her lap. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm. He turned the key and the engine sputtered, a cough, a growl, then roared to life. The sound filled the garage deep and alive, shaking the walls. Clara's breath caught, her eyes widening. "It's really running," she whispered almost to herself. "Told you she's a fighter," Nate said, revving it once for good measure. "Want to take her out? Just around the lot?" Clara nodded, a flicker of excitement breaking through her reserve. Nate eased the Corvette forward, the gravel crunching under the tires as they rolled into the sunlight. The car purred, smoother than he'd expected, and for a moment they just sat there, letting it breathe. Clara's hand rested on the dashboard, her fingers brushing the scratched James. "He'd love this," she said, her voice thick. "We used to drive up the coast, windows down, no plan, just free." Nate glanced at her, seeing the girl she must have been, wild-haired, laughing, alive. "Sounds like good days," he said. "Ellen and I had those too. She'd sing off-key. To the radio, make me pull over just to dance in the dirt." Clara laughed, a soft, rusty sound. "James couldn't dance, 2 left feet, but he'd try, just to make me smile." She looked out the window, the wind tugging at her hair. "I haven't felt that in so long." "Then let's feel it now," Nate said, impulsive but sure. He shifted gears and pulled onto the empty road behind the garage, picking up speed. The Corvette responded, eager, and Clara gasped, then laughed again. Louder, freer. The trees blurred past, the engine's roar a heartbeat they could both feel. But the joy shattered in an instant. A loud thunk jolted the car, and the steering wheel jerked in Nate's hands. "Hold on!" he shouted, slamming the brakes as a tire broke free, bouncing wildly across the road. The Corvette skidded to a stop, tilting awkwardly, and rain began to fall. Soft at first, then a downpour, drumming on the roof. Nate cursed under his breath, but Clara was already out, rain soaking her cardigan as she ran to the loose wheel. "We can fix it," she called, her voice bright with adrenaline. Nate grabbed a jack from the trunk, joining her in the mud. They worked together, slipping and swearing until the wheel was back on, their hands slick with grease and rain. When they climbed back inside, drenched and breathless, Clara looked at him, her face alive in a way he hadn't seen. "That was insane," she said, laughing through chattering teeth. "I haven't felt this alive since him." Nate wiped water from his eyes, grinning. "Guess we're a hell of a team, huh?" He reached over, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers lingering a second too long. She didn't pull away, and for a heartbeat the rain was the only sound. Clara broke the silence, her voice soft. "Thank you, Nate, for this, for not letting me run again." She touched his hand, brief but real, and he felt it, a current, warm and steady, pulling them past the shadows they'd both known too well. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the Corvette, something new was turning. A wheel, a chance, a beginning neither had expected. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving Harmony glistening under a shy November sun. Nate Harper stood in the garage, the Corvette's wheels secured and its engine purring softly after yesterday's wild ride. His hands still felt the damp chill of the storm, the warmth of Clara's touch when she'd brushed his fingers. That moment lingered, a quiet spark he couldn't shake. Not that he wanted to. For the first time in years, the garage didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a place where something might grow. Clara didn't come early that day, and Nate busied himself with the car, polishing the silver patches he'd uncovered, each stroke revealing more of its past glory. He was lost in the rhythm when the bell jingled, sharper than usual. He turned, expecting her smile, but it was Victor Lang again. Suit pristine, jaw tight, a man who carried authority like a weapon. "Harper," Victor said, stepping inside without invitation. "We need to talk." Nate set down his rag, wiping, his hands on his jeans. "Thought Clara made herself clear last time. Car stays till she says otherwise." Victor's eyes narrowed, cold and calculating. "This isn't about the car. It's about her. You're meddling in things you don't understand." He pulled a folded newspaper from his briefcase, tossing it onto the workbench. The headline screamed in faded ink, "Tech Mogul's Widow. Retreats after fatal crash. Clara Grayson's empire in limbo." Below it, a photo of a younger Clara, poised and polished, stood beside a wrecked car. Not the Corvette, but something else. Nate's stomach twisted. He scanned the date, 20 years old, and the words, "James Grayson, 42, killed in high-speed collision." "What's this?" he asked, voice low. "Her life," Victor said, his tone clipped. "Or what's left of it. Clara was a billionaire, still is, technically. Built a tech fortune with James, then walked away when he died. I've been holding it together since, keeping her safe, keeping her sane. And now you're dragging her back into this mess with that damn car." Nate's fingers tightened on the paper. "I'm fixing what she asked me to fix." "That's it." Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You think you're helping her. She's fragile, Harper. That Corvette's a trigger. Every scratch, every mile. James died chasing speed and she blames herself. You're not fixing anything. You're reopening wounds." The words hit Nate like a punch. He thought of Clara's tears, the way she'd laughed in the rain. Alive, not broken. "She's stronger than you think," he said, meeting Victor's gaze. "And I'm not the one trying to control her." Victor's lip curled. "You're a mechanic, not a therapist. Stay in your lane." He turned to leave, then paused. "She's coming apart. If you care about her, you'll let this go." The bell clanged as he exited, leaving the newspaper behind like a stain. Nate stood frozen, the article trembling in his hands. Clara Grayson, a name that carried weight he hadn't guessed. He pictured her in that beige cardigan, not a mogul's widow, but a woman who baked cookies and laughed in the mud. Was Victor right? Was he pushing her too far? The doubt gnawed at him, sharp and unfamiliar. When Clara arrived an hour later, thermos in hand, Nate's chest tightened. She looked lighter today, her silver hair tied back, a faint flush in her cheeks. "Afternoon, Nate," she said, pouring. "Coffee." "Miss me?" He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Always. Got the wheel squared away. Should be good to go." He hesitated, then slid the newspaper across the bench. Victor dropped by. "Left this." Clara's face drained of color as she saw the headline. Her thermos slipped, coffee splashing onto the floor, and she grabbed the paper with shaking hands. "He had no right," she whispered, her voice raw. "No right to bring this here." Nate stepped closer, unsure. "Clara, I didn't ask for it. He's worried about you. Says I'm hurting you, keeping this car around." She looked up, eyes blazing through tears. "He's wrong. He's been wrong for years. Victor thinks he's protecting me, but he's trapping me, keeping me in that moment, that crash." She crumpled the paper, tossing it aside. James loved this car. It wasn't the one that killed him. It was his dream, our dream. I let it rot because I couldn't face it. But you— She stopped, breathing hard. "You're giving it back to me." Nate's throat tightened. "I don't want to push you somewhere you're not ready to go." "You're not," she said, stepping toward him. "You're pulling me out. I was drowning, Nate, and I didn't even know it till you started this." She touched his arm, her fingers firm. "Don't stop. Please." He searched her face, seeing the strength he'd glimpsed in the rain, the woman who'd fought Victor, and won. "All right," he said, voice rough. "We'll keep going. Together." Clara nodded, a tear slipping free, but she smiled, a small, fierce thing. Nate grabbed a rag, kneeling to clean the spilled coffee, and she joined him, their hands brushing as they worked. The garage felt smaller, warmer, the Corvette a silent witness to a promise neither had spoken aloud. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the floor. Victor's words echoed, but Nate pushed them down. Clara wasn't breaking. She was rising, and he'd be damned if he let anyone, even himself, pull her back into the dark. The air in Harmony carried a bite now, November's chill settling into the earth as the days shrank. Nate Harper stood outside the garage, the Corvette idling beside him, its silver frame catching the last rays of a fading sun. The engine purred, steady and strong, a testament to weeks of work, and something more. Clara's words from yesterday echoed in his mind. "You're pulling me out." He hadn't known how much he needed to hear that, how much he'd been drowning too, until she'd said it. She arrived just as the sky turned amber, her beige cardigan swapped for a wool coat, the necklace glinting at her throat. "Ready?" she asked, her voice light but laced with something deeper. Anticipation, maybe, or resolve. Nate grinned, patting the hood. "She's been waiting. Thought we'd take her out for real this time. No breakdowns, no rain. Just a drive." He opened the passenger door, a small gesture that felt bigger somehow, and Clara slid in, her smile soft but real. He took the driver's seat, easing the Corvette onto the road that wound past Harmony's quiet streets. The engine growled, a low rumble that vibrated through them, and Clara leaned back, her eyes half closed. "It's like I remember," she said, almost to herself. "The sound, the feel." James would have pushed it faster, though. He loved the thrill. Nate glanced at her, the wind tugging at her silver hair through the cracked window. "You miss that? The speed?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Not anymore. I used to, back when it was us against the world. Now, I just want this. Quiet. Steady." She looked at him, her gaze warm. Safe. The word hung between them, heavy with trust. Nate kept the pace even, guiding the car past fields of browning grass and skeletal trees. They drove in companionable silence, the kind that didn't need filling until Clara pointed ahead. "Turn there. I want to show you something." He followed her lead, steering onto a narrow lane that dipped toward a wide, open meadow. The sun was sinking fast, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and pink. Nate pulled over, cutting the engine, and the stillness rushed in, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Clara stepped out, motioning for him to follow, and they walked to the edge of the field, where wildflowers clung stubbornly to life. "This was our spot," she said, her voice soft. "James and we'd stop here after long drives, just sit, and watch the sun go down. Said we'd build a house someday, right over there." She pointed to a rise in the distance, her hand steady. "Never did, of course. Life got in the way." Nate stood beside her, hands in his pockets, the necklace's weight a faint memory against his thigh. "It's beautiful," he said. "Peaceful. I can see why you'd pick it." Clara nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "After he died, I couldn't come back. Too many ghosts. But today, it feels different. Like I'm not running from them anymore." She turned to him, her eyes bright in the dusk. "You did that, Nate. This car, it's not just metal. It's a piece of me I thought I'd lost." He swallowed, caught off guard by the gratitude in her voice. "I just turned some wrenches, Clara. You're the one who kept it alive all these years." She shook her head, stepping closer. "No, you saw it. You saw me, when I couldn't. That's more than wrenches." Her hand brushed his arm, a quiet anchor, and Nate felt the air shift, charged with something new. Before he could respond, a crack of thunder rolled in the distance, sudden and sharp. Dark clouds swelled over the horizon, swallowing the sunset, and rain began to fall. Fat, heavy drops that splattered the meadow. Clara laughed, tilting her face to the sky. Again? Really? Nate grabbed her hand, tugging her toward the car. Come on, let's not tempt fate twice. They ran, stumbling over wet grass, and piled into the Corvette just as the storm broke loose. The rain hammered the roof, a wild drumbeat, and they sat there, breathless and soaked, laughter spilling out like it hadn't in years. Clara wiped water from her eyes, her coat dripping onto the seat. James would have loved this, too, the chaos of it. He'd say it's the universe keeping us on our toes. Nate chuckled, shaking rain from his hair. Ellen would have hated it. She'd be yelling at me to fix the wipers already. He paused, then added, But she'd like you, the way you take it all in stride. Clara's smile softened. I'd have liked her too. She sounds like she kept you honest. She did, he said, his voice rough with memory. Still does, in a way. The rain slowed, a gentle patter now, and Clara reached across the seat, her hand finding his. Thank you, Nate, for this, for bringing me here. I didn't know I needed it till now. He squeezed her hand, the warmth of her skin grounding him. Any time, Clara. Any time. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the storm outside faded, leaving just the two of them, two souls who'd found each other in the wreckage, holding on as the world spun around them. When they drove back, the sky was clearing, stars peeking through the clouds. The Corvette hummed beneath them, a steady heartbeat, and Nate felt it. A shift, deeper than before. Clara wasn't just healing. She was dreaming again, and somehow he was part of it. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. The garage glowed softly in the early November light, its cracked windows catching the first hints of dawn as Nate Harper tightened the last bolt on the Corvette's grille. The car was nearly whole now, silver paint gleaming where rust once reigned, its curves a quiet echo of the beauty it had lost and found again. He stepped back, hands on his hips, and felt a swell of pride, not just for the work, but for what it had brought him. Clara, her laughter in the rain, her hand in his, the way she'd looked at him under that stormy sky. It was more than he'd dared hope for in years. She arrived just after sunrise, a knitted scarf wrapped around her neck, the necklace glinting beneath it. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and she carried a paper bag that smelled of fresh bread. "Morning, Nate," she said, her voice bright. "I stopped by the bakery. Figured we'd earned a treat." Nate grinned, taking the bag and peering inside, 2 warm loaves still steaming. "You're gonna make me fat, Clara. But I'll risk it." He pulled a stool over for her, and they sat by the workbench breaking the bread apart, crumbs scattering like confetti. The simple act felt sacred, a ritual born of days spent together, piecing the Corvette and themselves back into something whole. "How's she looking?" Clara asked, nodding toward the car. "Like a dream," Nate said, brushing flour from his hands. "She's ready to roll, really roll. I was thinking, maybe we could do something with her. Not just drive, something bigger." Clara tilted her head, curious. "Bigger how?" Nate hesitated, the idea still raw in his mind. "Back when Ellen was alive, we talked about starting a program, teaching kids how to fix cars, give them a trade, a purpose. Never got around to it. But this," he gestured to the Corvette, "it's got me thinking. We could use the garage, maybe even her, to make it happen. For James, too. A way to keep his spirit moving." Clara's eyes widened, then softened. "A legacy," she murmured, "for both of them." She set her bread down, her fingers tracing the necklace. James would have loved that. He was always tinkering, teaching anyone who'd listen. And me. I've got resources, more than I've known what to do with since he's been gone. Nate leaned forward, caught by the spark in her voice. "You mean it? You'd be in?" She nodded, a slow smile breaking through. "I'm in. Let's do it. For them, for us." They spent the next hour dreaming aloud. Nate sketching plans on a napkin, Clara suggesting tools and space, their voices weaving a future neither had dared imagine alone. The bell jingled mid-conversation, and a familiar figure stepped in. Victor. Lang, his suit as sharp as ever, but his face less certain. Nate tensed, but Clara stood, her posture firm. "Victor," she said, "if you're here to fight about the car again—" "I'm not," he cut in, raising a hand. "I'm here to apologize. To both of you." He glanced at Nate, then back to Clara. "I was wrong. About the car. About you. I thought I was protecting you, but I was holding you back. I saw the article got to you and I panicked. I'm sorry." Nate blinked, caught off guard. Clara softened, but her voice stayed steady. "You've been my rock, Victor. But I don't need a cage anymore. I'm finding my way, thanks to this." She gestured to the garage to Nate. Victor nodded, a rare crack in his armor showing. "I see that now. James was my friend too. Losing him broke us both. I didn't want to lose you to this." He pulled an envelope from his briefcase, handing it to her. "It's the deed to the old warehouse on Pine Street. Been sitting empty since the company folded. If you're serious about this project, it's yours." Clara took it, her breath catching. "Victor, this is a start," he finished. "You're not the only one who's been stuck." He turned to Nate, offering a nod. "Take care of her, Harper. She's tougher than she looks." Nate returned the nod, a silent truce. "Always." Victor left, the bell ringing out his exit, and Clara sank back onto the stool, the envelope trembling in her hands. "I can't believe it," she said, tears brimming. "He's giving us a chance, a real one." Nate knelt beside her, his hand resting on hers. "We're giving it to ourselves, Clara. You, me, James, Ellen. This is ours." She looked at him, her eyes shining, and leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was close. A promise, a shared breath. In the quiet dawn, they spent the day planning, Clara pulling strings from a past life Nate could barely fathom, calls to old contacts, sketches of a workshop. She even tied an apron over her coat, baking more bread in the garage's tiny kitchenette while Nate hauled tools. A neighbor kid, Tommy, wandered in, wide-eyed at the Corvette, and Nate handed him a wrench, showing him how to tighten a bolt. Clara watched, laughing as Tommy beamed and whispered, "It's starting already." By evening, the garage felt alive. Bread on the bench, plans on the table, Tommy chattering about engines. Clara stood beside Nate, her shoulder brushing his, and said, "I didn't know I could feel this again. Hope, purpose. You gave me that." Nate smiled, his voice low. "You gave it right back." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, but inside, a new light burned, steady, warm, and growing. A year had passed since that first rain-soaked day, and Harmony buzzed with a quiet vitality Nate Harper hadn't seen in decades. The old warehouse on Pine Street, once a hollow shell, now stood transformed, a workshop alive with the clatter of tools, the laughter of kids, and the steady hum of engines. Grayson Harper Garage read the sign above the door, painted in bold silver letters that caught the late autumn sun. It was more than a name. It was a promise kept, a legacy born from two hearts that had found each other in the wreckage. Nate stood inside, a wrench in hand, watching a dozen teenagers swarm the Corvette. Tommy, the wiry kid who'd wandered, months ago, was leading the charge, showing a shy girl named Mia how to check the oil. Clara moved among them, her silver hair tied back, an apron over her coat as she handed out sandwiches from a tray. She caught Nate's eye and smiled, a smile that had grown brighter, steadier over the months they'd spent building this dream. The grand opening was today, a celebration of what they'd made together. The warehouse smelled of fresh paint and gasoline, its walls lined with tools donated by Clara's old contacts, its floor scuffed from eager feet. Outside, the Corvette gleamed, parked as the centerpiece, a symbol of where it all began. Nate had polished it that morning, his hands lingering on the dashboard where JAMES still whispered its story. Clara stepped beside him, brushing crumbs from her hands. "Look at them," she said, her voice warm with wonder. "They're learning, growing. James would have been proud. Ellen, too." Nate nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, feels like they're here, doesn't it? Watching us fumble through this." He chuckled, but his eyes were soft, tracing the kids who'd become their unexpected family. She touched his arm, a habit now, grounding them both. "We're not fumbling anymore, Nate. We're flying." Her fingers lingered, and he felt the familiar pull, the one that had started in the rain, deepened in the dusk, and settled into something permanent. The ceremony began at noon, the townsfolk gathering in the crisp air. Victor was there, tie loosened, a rare grin on his face as he clapped Nate on the shoulder. "You pulled it off, Harper. I'll eat my words, happily." He'd become an ally, not a shadow, helping secure permits and funds when Clara asked. Redemption suited him. Clara took the makeshift stage, a platform of crates, her voice steady as she spoke. "This place is for second chances," she said, the crowd hushing. "For James Grayson, who taught me to dream. For Ellen Harper, who showed Nate how to love. And for all of you, kids who need a spark, folks who need a purpose. We built this together, and it's yours." She glanced at Nate, her eyes shining, and he felt the weight of her words settle into his bones. Tommy and Mia unveiled a plaque beside the Corvette, "In memory of James and Ellen, where light lives on." The crowd applauded, but Nate barely heard it. He was watching Clara, the woman who'd walked into his garage with a broken car and left with his heart, or maybe taken it with her, piece by piece. As the day wound down, the kids dispersed, and the townsfolk drifted home. Nate and Clara stayed, behind. The warehouse grew quiet, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the floor. She pulled him toward the Corvette, opening the driver's door. "One more ride?" she asked, her voice playful but tender. He slid in, and she took the passenger seat, the leather creaking under them. They drove out of Harmony, the road stretching toward the meadow they'd visited a year ago. The engine purred, a steady heartbeat, and Clara rested her hand on his, the necklace glinting at her throat. "I sold the mansion last week," she said, breaking the silence. "Moved into a little place near town. No more hiding." Nate's eyebrows shot up. "You didn't tell me." "Wanted it to be a surprise," she said, smiling. "The money's in the program now. Scholarships, tools, whatever they need. James's dream. My way of letting go." He squeezed her hand, pride swelling in his chest. "You're something else, Clara Grayson." "So are you, Nate Harper." She paused, then reached into her pocket, pulling out a small box. "I made something, too. For us." She opened it, revealing a silver pendant, twin to hers engraved with "To Our Light." "You gave mine back. This one's yours." Nate's breath caught, his fingers trembling as he took it. "Clara, He stopped, words failing him, and instead slipped it around his neck, the metal cool against his skin. "Guess we're a matched set now." She laughed, soft and free, and leaned across the seat, her lips brushing his. A kiss, gentle but sure, tasting of bread and promises. He kissed her back, his hand cupping her cheek, and the world shrank to just them, the Corvette cradling their quiet joy. They parked in the meadow as dusk fell, the wildflowers faded but still clinging to life. Nate cut the engine, and they sat, hands entwined, watching the stars emerge. "I didn't think I'd find this again," Clara whispered. "Love, hope, you." "Me neither," Nate said, his voice rough with emotion. "But here we are. Under all that dust, we found forever." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they stayed there, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. The Corvette sat silent, its journey complete. Not just a car, but a bridge from loss to life, from shadows to light. Back in Harmony, the warehouse stood waiting, a beacon for tomorrow's dreams. And in the meadow, two hearts beat as one. There, pendants glinting under the stars, a testament to the miracles that kindness, time, and a little rust could uncover. And that's where their road takes us. A journey from rust to redemption, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can spark something extraordinary. What do you think, folks? Have you ever found hope in an unexpected place, or maybe fixed something broken that changed your life? Drop your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them, and I'll be jumping in to chat with you all. If this tale of second chances and quiet miracles hit you right in the heart, don't miss out on more stories like it. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you're the first to catch every new ride we take together, right here on 10 Ken Chua Ban. Let's keep the light burning. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. It means the world to share this with you. Your time, your thoughts, they're what keep this engine running. Until next time, keep looking for the light beneath the dust. See you soon.